Welcome to the Run Out. I am your host, Neil Barrett. On today's show, we are joined by Hayden Lewis. He is the current beat writer in the PLL for the Carolina Chaos, as well as a current student and writer covering the Penn State men's lacrosse team. So given the last few weeks between those two teams, and even really the last few months for the Carolina Chaos, we have plenty to talk about. But before we get to Hayden, we absolutely have to talk about some of the lacrosse that happened this past weekend. So without further ado, let's get into it. The NCAA quarterfinal round took place this past weekend, and the game of the weekend, without any shadow of a doubt, was Cornell versus Richmond. It was a incredible game, truly two teams just throwing haymakers, going at each other. Lots of people said kind of the same thing. It was a shame that one of these two teams had to lose. It was truly one of the most fun games to watch that I can remember in at least the last few years. The only one that really comes to mind off the top of my head is that 14 Notre Dame Albany game, in terms of just like the way it felt to watch and be involved and how fun it was to watch. Admittedly, that one went into overtime, so maybe it still wins out. But this was such a fun game, such a good back and forth battle. I think anyone not a Cornell Red fan was probably convinced middle of that game to be cheering for Richmond. It was just an incredible, like, fairy tale kind of Cinderella game. Like, I can't imagine they could have played a better game, and they nearly won. They probably, in a lot of ways, deserved to win, but it is, in fact, Cornell that comes away with the win and moves on to the Final Four next week in Boston. The next game was Syracuse-Princeton. We're going to start calling this the Joey Spallina game. He was everywhere, doing everything, ended the game with 4 goals and 4 assists. This was another just like incredibly fun game to watch, very back and forth, game of a couple of runs. Syracuse looked like they were going to be out of the tournament in the middle of the third, maybe even into the fourth a little bit, down by a couple of goals. It looked like Princeton was going to do enough to hold on, and Joey Spallina just kind of took over and finished out the game for Syracuse, and they ended up winning and making it to the Final Four. This is the only game that I did not predict correctly, although if you guys will remember, I did say that the ACC champion I thought was going to make Final Four weekend, but I will hold up my hands. Obviously, I picked Penn State or Princeton. And I did think that it was going to be very close, and I did think that it could go either way. And this was the one game I've really debated changing. But because I had ridden with Princeton for so long, I just kind of stuck with them. But Syracuse absolutely deserved that win. It was fun to see Joey Spallina get to talk a little bit of talk at the end of the game and make it known that he had seen some of the discourse earlier in the week. For anyone who missed out, there obviously are lots of trolls online, but I don't think this had to do with the trolls specifically. I don't think that while Joe Spallina, Joey's dad, has made it clear that he sees them, he has made it a point not to respond to the trolls. And I think by and large, most people would say, why respond to them? They're not really worth the time and effort that it takes to respond to most of the time. So I tend to think that this was more a direct response to the conversation around Adam Lamberti's first big board that he put out last week, in which he named Joey Spallina as the number 6 best available player at this point for next season's draft. Obviously, things will change, but he had Joey Spallina at 6th and was the number 3 attackman, I believe, if I remember correctly, on the board. And that, to me and many other people, seemed completely ludicrous, but Adam stuck by his guns, and I'm not coming at Adam. Adam does so much work to do that stuff, and we may have a longer conversation about Joey Spallina, but suffice it to say, I think Joey Spallina saw it and was responding to it, and he earned his right to talk the talk after walking the walk and leading Syracuse back to the Final Four for the first time since 2013. Going to be a lot of fun to see them play in Boston next week. The next game on Sunday was Notre Dame, Penn State. Very, very many people thought Notre Dame was going to roll in this one. And to be fair, for a while, it looked like they were going to. But ultimately, Penn State scored 8 unanswered goals to run out with a 2-point victory, 14-12. Matt Traynor absolutely put Penn State on his back, finishing with 6 goals and an assist in the game. He was absolutely incredible. He was doing everything that Penn State needed. Every time they needed a play, he went and made it. And once they got on that roll, Notre Dame looked completely helpless. They didn't have an answer for it. The conversation that was really interesting to me after this game was that so many people talked about Notre Dame choking and not so much about what Penn State did to get what they wanted to happen. I felt like a lot more of it had to do with Penn State making the plays than Notre Dame choking it away. It was really interesting to see the reaction to Syracuse coming back versus Penn State coming back. And Syracuse was all talked about how like they took charge, they took over the game, they made the plays, but it was in the Notre Dame Penn State game, it was talked about like Notre Dame choked it away. And I think a lot of that has to do with the pedigree of them having won the last 2 national championships and being a favorite in a lot of people's minds to win a 3rd again this year. But I don't think that's necessarily reflective of who this Notre Dame team was this year. Admittedly, I am not always the biggest fan of Notre Dame, but I didn't see it this year. I didn't feel like they had the weapons on offense, the goal stopping power on defense, and I think that kind of came out in this game. They got up big. I think they did some things to Penn State early, but then Penn State adjusted, and I don't think Notre Dame had any answer for Penn State's adjustments. Clearly, that's why they won. So pretty cool to see. For those of you that have listened to the show for a while, you will know that I have been on Penn State's bandwagon most of the season. I called them a dark horse for Memorial Day weekend and thought that they were going to be here. And I have had them in my Final Four predictions for most of the season. I just thought that they had all the things that you need to win in May, and the big question mark I think around them was whether or not Frassian was going to have big games. And of course, against Notre Dame, he did have a big game. And I think that was really kind of a big difference maker. And if he can keep that up, I definitely think that Penn State has a very good chance at kind of shocking the world, for lack of a better term, the lacrosse world anyway, and running out of Boston with an NCAA championship. That will obviously be hard fought. There's a long road to get there, but they have a very good shot if they can get those kind of performances from Frassian and Matt Traynor, hands down, will have something to say about it come Memorial Day Monday. And then the final game of the weekend was Maryland and Georgetown. Honestly, this one was, especially comparatively to the other three games, this one was really kind of slow and boring. I even tweeted out at the end of the game, I bet I got to think even Maryland fans were bored by that game. And most of them said that they were. Most of them were honest and said that they were. Obviously, it's good to see your team win. You're going to be excited about that. But that game was pretty boring. And even though it was relatively close, if I remember correctly, it was only a 2-goal game at the end. It never really felt like it. I don't know that it ever felt like Georgetown was really in it, even though, again, they were never really very far behind. It just felt like one of those games where no one was really going to score, and just the fact that Maryland already had the lead was just going to kind of carry over. It was not a very inspiring game, and I last week said that I thought, in a quick kind of summation of what was going on, I thought that Maryland might win the national championship, and that game put a lot of doubt in my mind, because Georgetown is not Syracuse or Penn State or Cornell even. All three of the teams that Maryland will potentially face in the next 2 rounds are significantly better than Georgetown. And I just did not think that they looked very good. Apart from a few bright spots here, I did not think that Maryland looked like the team that will be holding the trophy on Monday. They still could. They're still a good team, and this could have just been their down game. But based on that evidence, it's really hard for me to think that they're going to actually win. Having seen all of the teams play, I really feel like Princeton and Syracuse or Penn State and Syracuse are probably my two favorites. Obviously, Cornell and Maryland both can win. I just think that both Cornell and Maryland showed a lot of weakness, I think, in the game against Georgetown. Again, they can show up on Saturday and look like world beaters, and I'll be wrong, and that's fine. But I just don't think that they have what it's going to take to win the national championship. Penn State reminds me a lot of the Notre Dame 2023 team, I think, in terms of like, they have a lot of like grit to them. They have a lot of guys that just like don't quit. They run so hard. They make all the plays. Whenever you need someone to step up, someone on that team steps up, makes the plays. And again, if Raytheon is going to be as good as he has been the last couple of weeks, then they're going to be really, really tough to beat. Syracuse has proven that they can outrun anybody. Whatever their weaknesses are, they can outrun. The one thing that worries me about Syracuse is they have played a few successive games now without kind of laying that egg that they did here and there earlier in the season. And part of me just kind of feels like, oh, they might be due for laying an egg. They remind me a lot of the Duke team. They are a better team. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they are Duke's level, but they remind me of that Duke team that like they have that egg laying in them somewhere. So that would be the concern with Syracuse. I'm not suggesting that it will happen. It's just the concern of like, oh, will they? I think Cornell, again, can obviously win. They're clearly talented enough to win. I worry that Penn State's already beat them, and they already beat them without Matt Trainer in the lineup. I know that there was the whole like penalty thing, the unreleasable, but if you remove that but add Matt Trainer in, it feels like you probably end up with the same result. So Penn State already beat them. I think Penn State can beat them again. Not necessarily that they will, but they can. And then Syracuse is the team to me that looks like could just completely outrun them. So, I think Cornell's best route is that they beat Penn State probably in a relatively close game, and then they get Maryland in the next round in the championship. And I think that's their best path. Again, not saying that they can't beat Syracuse. I just think that's their best path to winning the championship. So I'm going to let's do this live again. Oh my goodness. I am going to modify my picks. I'm going to take I'm going to get this wrong. Why do I do this to myself? I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to take Penn State and Syracuse. And Penn State wins the national championship? That's certainly the one I'm rooting for. I don't know how much my bias is kicking in here. Again, trying to do this live, you don't actually think through things. You just kind of spout some stuff off and hope for the best. So don't come at me feel free to come at me, but don't come at me too hard, knowing that I just did this live on the spot and I can and likely will be very wrong about these picks. But yes, I'm going to ride with Penn State, I think. I have been on the wagon almost all season. Matt Trainer is probably my favorite player of the year. And Jeff Tambroni is a great coach. And I think he deserves to finally get his hands on that trophy after having made the championship game with Cornell and losing and then making it and then missing out on it a few times with Penn State. He's one of those guys that doesn't get enough credit for what he's doing, and I am hoping that he can finally get some credit. It's one of those things that I don't think we talk about enough, that Penn State has been to 3 Final Fours in the last 6 years. They basically go to the Final Four every other year, and they do it in almost a very quiet manner. Like we don't really talk about them. We don't really notice how good and consistent they have been. So I think it might be their turn. They have a feeling of a team of destiny about them. So I'm gonna go with Penn State. We'll ride that one out. I will be in Boston for the Final Four this weekend, both the semifinals and the championship game on Monday. If you are in the area, please hit me up. Message me on social media or something. I'll try to meet up with you guys as much as I can. I might even have some stickers or something to give away. Whatever. If you guys come find me, I will be there, and I would love to meet you guys, talk to you guys. It would be a lot of fun. My wife will be with me for the semifinals, but I will be alone for the championship on Monday. So again, definitely hit me up if you guys are going to be there. I cannot talk about lacrosse this past weekend and not discuss the NLL finals that started this weekend between the 2 best teams in the NLL all season, the Buffalo Bandits and the Saskatchewan Rush. This is the matchup that everyone was eyeing when the playoffs started. Number 1 versus number 2. In game 1, the Buffalo Bandits were the home team, and they walked out with a 12-10 victory. In game 2 in Saskatchewan, the Rush held serve and protected home field, winning 11-10, setting up a finely balanced game 3 at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday. If I had one little tiny complaint, it is that the NCAA semifinal games will not be over until probably 5, maybe even 5:30, depending on how the games go. And this would have been a really good opportunity to push that game 3 to 6 or 7 or something, and give the lacrosse audience out there some kind of runway to get turned over at this point. If you are watching the NCAA semifinals, there's a chance that you could miss a decent chunk of this game. Hopefully that's not the case. You'll only miss a little bit of it. But again, if there was one kind of minor complaint, that's what it would be. I understand that, the NLL may not have been fully in control of the schedule, and there are other things we've talked about on the show before, scheduling time slots for TV and availability of venues and all kinds of stuff that go into this. So I know that it wasn't probably just as simple as whatever the NLL wanted, but it is one thing that I would have liked to see. Again, another flip side of that is that, that's the downside of them pushing the season end up a week. That will ultimately help the PLL, because even with this game 3, they will be done Saturday, and anyone who is involved should be able to make camp if they want to. A lot of guys, especially if they have just come off the end of the season and they have played 3 games of the NLL finals, will often take a break and they won't directly go to camp, but sometimes they do. And this would be one of the situations where if a player feels capable of it and are not already engaged in an MSL team and are actually playing in the PLL, which, to be completely honest, I don't know who on these 2 teams would qualify. I don't know who is on a team. I think Levi Anderson. The rumors are that Jake Naso might be getting picked up. Beyond that, I'm a little bit iffy on that. But all that to say, it's kind of the calculus of this time of year between the NLL wrapping up their season, the NCAA playoffs, and the start of the PLL season, kind of all being right there over these couple of weeks. One of the big universal complaints about lacrosse is that we can't get all 3 of them on the same page. But all aside, game 3, 4:30 on Saturday, should be an epic conclusion to this NLL season that has been so much fun to watch and be a part of. Maybe next year we will finally make it to an NLL game in person, and that will be the thing that finally kind of sinks this version of lacrosse into my bones in a way that watching on TV has yet to really do so far. But with that said, let's bring on Hayden Lewis. All right, we are here with Hayden Lewis, who is the Carolina Chaos beat writer for the PLL. Hayden, thank you for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Had a great day so far, and this is going to make it better. So I'm looking forward to this.
I like hearing that. That's cool. I guess we'll start where you probably are most excited to start, and that is you are currently, if I did my math right, you are a junior at Penn State, wrapping junior year, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. We finished up class a couple weeks ago now, like a week and a half ago. I finished up class and all my finals, so I'm back home now. But yeah, obviously got a nice little championship weekend run going on for Penn State. Tomorrow morning we have the NCAA media, so we get to talk to Coach T and some of the other coaches ahead of that. But super pumped for this squad. To be candid and quite frank, I didn't know what to expect of the team this year. I watched them first in the fall, just watched their blue-white game, their scrimmage against each other, and you knew the obvious pieces you had, like the Matt Trainers, the Alex Ross, Kevin Parnamith back in. You have Jack Frassi in net. I don't think the team's necessarily expected the Jack Frassi they've had this season, but they still know the type of goalie they have in net and know what he can bring. So I'd say Penn State it's a dark horse team that still really hasn't played its best brand of lacrosse. And if Hunter Aquino can magically reach 100% by the end of this week, they could be scary and still create some major noise in the coming days. So it's going to be an exciting week here.
Yeah, I've had them as the dark horse. To be fair, I wasn't sure how far, once they made it to Memorial Day weekend, how far they were gonna go. Because like you said, they've been kind of not at 100% of what they could be, I think is a fair way of putting it. But I was on the bandwagon very early, and I was really excited to see, especially there was a period of time when I was like, oh crap, like this is just not going to go well. And then they just took off, and it was such a fun game to watch.
It's been an interesting season. I mean, Matt Traynor gets hurt against Yale in a game that Kyle Lehman breaks out and has 5 goals. Traynor doesn't play the next week against Cornell, and they figure it out with that non-releasable penalty. Obviously, a little discussion with that, but I mean, it's just been one of those years where they haven't gotten bounces. They've gotten some fortunate bounces, but it's just kind of a testament to Coach Tambroni and what they preach in that locker room. In the past 3 years, had established a pretty solid relationship with Coach, and he's very down to earth. And his team, it's not a team, it's a family, and that's a big thing they preach. And anybody that's within that program, whether it's ranging from a social media coordinator that's a student intern to the director of lacrosse operations, an assistant coach, a coordinator, or even coach himself, everybody preaches the family aspect. You talk to any of the guys that are in the league right now, they'll preach it as well. The team this year, it's team 112, the 112th year of varsity lacrosse within Penn State, and just the sport as well, being at the school. So there's a lot of camaraderie amongst this group, and the team just has a different feeling where in the past couple of years, my first 2 years at school, it was, a lot of the vets, a lot of the old guys kind of running the show, the TJ Malones to Jack Posies. Now it's kind of that new wave of guys that have been there just as long or a little bit longer than me. So you kind of have grown with them through some of the losses and the wins. So it's been very fun and very intriguing season.
Yeah. You kind of answered it, but one of my questions was going to be like, what is it that Coach Tambroni is doing there in State College? Because I think sort of under the radar, you look back and you're like, man, they've made the Final Four 3 times in the last 6 years. Like they have gone from, when obviously Grant Ament made one of those kind of original Final Four runs, but that team with him and Mac O'Keefe up until they were seniors, it was like they were the team that was, excuse me, kind of knocking on the door, hoping to make that next jump to now they have kind of made that jump, and they're consistently, knocking on the door at Memorial Day weekend. And it doesn't feel like it. I don't think that the lacrosse world as a whole kind of thinks of them as being that level of a team. And you've kind of touched on it, and some of this probably goes before your time being in at Penn State, but I'm wondering what you think has kind of changed for Tambroni and this staff and this program as a whole that has pushed them there, because again, I think we're not paying attention to them as much as perhaps we should.
Yeah, I think, the easy way out of this is saying culture. Every team will preach its culture and talk about those sort of things. With Penn State, they have a mantra. It's your teammates for life. So if you played in 1986, long before Coach Tambroni was there, you're still teammates for life with Ryan DeRocco, who's a second-line midfielder on Penn State right now, who started the season at attack, but you're teammates for life. And that's a kid that was playing at Army last year. It doesn't matter when you got to the program. That's one of the things they've established in Coach Tambroni's time. And I just think it's the people that Coach Tambroni recruits and the young men that him and his coaching staff cultivate in their teachings and just the way they lead the group. You talk to a freshman on that team, you can tell that's, an 18, a 19-year-old kid that's still learning to become an adult. But by the time you have a 21 or a 22-year-old like a Matt Trainer this year and the years past, a TJ Malone, who granted was 24, 25 when I was talking to him my first couple of years. They're unbelievable humans. That's what Penn State's breeding. They're not breeding just great lacrosse players and very good, very deep lacrosse teams. Their main focus is breeding great humans and great individuals. And that's something that, we've in media have talked to Coach Tambroni about. We've asked him, like, what are some of the big things that you're looking for in your players? What are you looking for on the recruiting circle and the circuit? And it's never, obviously he's going to say we're looking for talent, but it's never we're looking for talent alone. We're also looking for the kids that, look like they can be a leader in our program, that look like they'll have a fit. And a good way to look at it is the transfers this year for Penn State. Jeff Tambroni basically said, we don't look to go out and grab the biggest name if it's not going to fit in our lineup. We want to grab people that we think will fit within our system, fit within our conference, but also fit in the team and make that shift from one program to another seamlessly. This year, it's been Jack Amon and Ryan DeRocco. And each year at the beginning of the season, the lacrosse team goes out to one of the local mountains around State College, and they just go on a little camping trip for a few days. There's no phones allowed. It's just the team and the rest of the staff along with the team. They go out, no phones, no technology, and everybody just gets to know each other. They do team building activities, some other stuff along the way. And Coach said essentially, from day one, when Jack and Ryan were with the group, we knew they'd have chemistry right away. It was right away. Those guys were getting involved. They were making their names known. They were being great teammates from the start. And I think that's just a big thing. They always preach teammate. It's never an I, it's never a me. It's always we. It's always we're looking for a teammate, not somebody to be a superstar. We just want teammates. If we have a group of teammates that's going to work together to its fullest extent from day one, then we're going to put together a great result on the field come springtime and come May. So it's kind of a long-established culture that's finally reaping the benefits from all the work that was put in the prior 10 or so years since Coach T's been here for 15 now.
Yeah. No, and it's funny too, because I was looking at like recruiting classes, and to say Penn State's not getting good players is not going to be true. Obviously, they're getting good players, but compared to, other teams that have been in similar positions, they're getting, lesser players, quote unquote. And it's interesting to hear him say looking for fit, because a lot of it I look back on and I'm like, how much of it is guys that come in and are the right fit, and how much of it is, Coach Tambroni building those guys to be the right fit. So that's interesting. The next question, and we'll move on to some other things here in a minute, but can they win it all?
I think realistically, yes. Obviously, the only team to beat Cornell this year, and it was a wacky game. There's a weird call, but that's also a game they didn't have Matt Trainer. I think the one big change in that game, Colby Baldwin, who was the starter for Penn State, he's dealing with a broken hand or a hand-related injury, as was talked about on the broadcast. You could see the cast on the arm as well during the game this past weekend. He was north of 55%, I believe, against Cascadon in that first game. Reed Gills has come in and been unbelievable for a true freshman, but I think it really comes down to that battle. Is Gills able to showcase what he's shown since the start of the Big Ten tournament, or is there going to be a little bit of a falling back now that he's out of that, freshman big time jump, whatever you want to call it? But realistically, like, Penn State matches up well. Alex Ross has held CJ Kurtz to 3 points or less the last two seasons when that's been the one-on-one matchup. If there's one person that is, I'd say, looking to take on CJ Kurtz, it might be Alex Ross. He may be the only person that doesn't fear CJ Kurtz because of his success in the past couple of years. And it's also Penn State's track record against Cornell since my freshman year in 22-23. They haven't lost against Cornell. That's the one team that has seemingly had Cornell's number from day one. So I think, you win that game against Cornell. I don't really think there's a way you can stop just the overall emotional pull that team will have, because Coach Tambroni's never won a national title as well. He got to the game with Cornell, but they didn't win. And I think that's just something that this team feels like if they give him the opportunity to get to that game again, this is the type of team that would win it for him. Cuse, very deep team, hard not to like a team with Owen Hiltz. And I say that as the Chaos beat writer, but also somebody that lived with him for 2 years in the Culver Barracks and knows who Hiltzy is and knows what coaches have said about him since the time he was, 17, 18 years old, lighting it up in Northern Indiana of all places for high school. But it's a weird year. And I'll say if Penn State can get through that first game, there's no thought in my mind that says they'll lose. And it's kind of been that way every game this year, though. For me, it's always been, there's a realistic world where I could see Penn State winning this, but I wouldn't be shocked. And I'm more so referencing the Big Ten schedule and here throughout the playoffs, where it's like, these are all games that could go any way. And it just comes down to who wants it more. And Penn State's the type of team, they're not going to beat you with the most thought or just the biggest names in the country, like a Cuse or a Cornell, or even a Maryland for that matter with Spanos, even though they're probably not the most deep team on the offensive side. I just think Penn State's going to beat you with heart. They're going to beat you with grit, and it's going to be a team effort, and that's what they've shown all year. So if they can beat Cornell, I think they realistically have a chance. For Maryland's case, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in the same year, so that's going in Penn State's favor. And then against Cuse, I think, defensively, they can match up against them. Offensively, I think they'll get their chances and they'll get their opportunities they have all season. And you look at some of the teams, some of the similar opponents like the Princeton, the first one you look at, maybe Maryland as well, another similar opponent. You can look at the film and find ways to make it really look like, hey, yeah, Penn State does have a chance. I think they're probably the least thought of in terms of winning it this year, but I think realistically, yeah, they do have a chance to win it. It's just going to take a full team effort, and it's just going to take more of what we saw in the comeback last week, where Matt Trainor's got to lead the ship and everybody else has to hop in. His lieutenants, Kyle Lehman, they're going to hop in on board as well, but everybody else will pitch in. It's just a matter of when and where and at what point in the game.
Yeah. One last thing, and I promise we'll move off of Penn State. I'm sure not that you mind talking about them, but moving forward, we're moving past this weekend. What do you think Matt Trainor is going to bring to that Atlas offense that maybe they're missing now? I don't know if they're missing anything, technically, but Yeah,
it's really hard to say. Obviously, that offense is so elite, and then Stephen Brooks, arguably the best offensive coordinator in the league. And that could be proven with just how that team performed last year. I know the playoffs didn't go the way they wanted, but to me, my favorite Matt Trainor at Penn State outside of last weekend against Notre Dame was my freshman year, when he was coming out of the box and just tormenting short sticks or LSMs, running downhill, dodging down the alleys, but then also just off ball, he doesn't get a ton of credit for his ability to get open. But even if you watch back a couple of the goals from last weekend's game against Notre Dame, he's a very smart cutter. He knows where to get to on the field. He's great off ball. And I think in an offense that has Jeff Teat and Connor Schellenberger, who are 2 of the best in the league at finding guys and finding cutters, he could score 25 plus goals as a rookie. Maybe not that many, just because they have so many other scorers in that offense. It's going to be hard to put up that number. But I mean, he's going to get to his spots and he'll find areas to score from. He won't necessarily have to be used as a dodger, but he still has that ability, and having that in your back pocket for a guy that may be the 5th option when he's running out of the box is kind of scary. So I think, the ceiling for Matt Trainor in his first year, 25 goals. And I think, anything north of 15, you'd be happy if you're an Atlas fan, because that replaces Dox, who's obviously not a part of that group anymore. And I think you look at it, you just got 3 midfielders in this most recent draft that all bring different skill sets, and they're going to be scary again on that side of the field. So it's just a matter of time till we truly see who's the alpha of that rookie class for them.
Yeah. No, Matt Trainor, I honestly can't say that I knew much about him prior to this season, but he's just become like my favorite player this year. And when he got drafted to the Atlas, I was like, oh my goodness, like that's an insane weapon to be, like you said, like your fourth, fifth, maybe even technically your sixth guy in that offense. Like that's just insane. So let's go back a little bit. I have followed you for a little while now. You've been the beat writer for the KS for, this is your second season?
Yeah, this will be my second season.
Okay. So yeah, so I guess I started following you back last year. But I always really like to learn, how people got into the game. I think I understand that you are from Indiana. You are from Indiana? Okay. Yeah. I know Culver, but I didn't know if you were I thought you were from Indiana, which is obviously a lacrosse, metropolitan area, huge lacrosse in Indiana, right?
Yeah, so it's bigger, I'd say. I mean, obviously Culver has been established for a long time now, but it's growing. It's definitely growing in Indiana. I wouldn't say it's fully solidified as a sport. I think in high school, it's really mainly the Indianapolis schools. You got some in the northern part up by South Bend with the Fighting Irish up there. Obviously, you get some of those teams, but Southern Indiana hasn't really picked up the game as much, which is interesting. I grew up originally in Columbus, Indiana, which is about an hour southeast of Indianapolis. And when I was about like 10, 11 years old, that was like the first time I picked up a stick, but I didn't really fully get into the game until I got to Culver. It wasn't until really the back half of my time there at Culver that I got into the game. But it's been growing since about the time I was, 10, 11 years. So a decade now that I'm 21. But yeah, it was really, I was a hockey player first. So I went to Culver for, obviously the academics, the leadership, but also hockey. Our hockey programs very similar to lacrosse in the sense that we're playing a national schedule. My senior year, our number one rival was Shattuck St. Mary's. And that year Shattuck had Max Celebrini, who was drafted first overall last year. So that's who I was playing against my senior year, having the fun task of trying to lock him down center on center. And they also, they had Will Whitelaw, who was a top 3 round draft pick to the Columbus Blue Jackets. They had the Islanders first round draft pick, slipping my name, Cole Eiserman. He was a first rounder the same year as Celebrini to the Islanders, like 19th overall. So that's kind of where my competitive background goes to. But then after hockey season, it's either you're training, you're getting on the ice, but each year after you lose, it's like, man, I don't want to get back on the ice right away. Like I got to take some time away. So it's, what can I do with my time? And when you're at a school like Culver where you're living in a barrack with, 200 other guys and 50, 60 of them in the building you're living in all have lacrosse sticks in your room, you're naturally going to go grab one and you're going to go out and toss the ball in the field behind the barrack, or you're going to go out to the actual lacrosse field and go take some shots with some of the guys. You have classmates that were goalies that, they're playing college lacrosse right now. The funny one for me is Colin Vickery. I call him Vic, who is the Princeton backup who had to go in for that man up. Didn't face a shot, but classmate of mine that, had 8 or 9 classes with him in my 4 years at Culver and, took shots on him. This guy I talked to about lacrosse all the time, but really me getting into lacrosse is because of people like him, people like Griffin Skane, who's at Penn, who is Izzy Skane's little brother, Cam Pack at Jacksonville, he's a D-Midi, Lucas Osborne, another guy down there, some guys at Utah and other players across the country who's seeing what they were doing, seeing where they were going and saying like, hey, like these are some of my closest friends. I want to follow along with them and make sure I'm following their journey. And then I decided to start playing, late in my junior year, which our hockey season that year because of COVID didn't end until May, and that's the end of lacrosse season too. So I didn't really play. I was just kind of messing around. Our coach was the 24-year-old intern that also coached hockey as well. So he's just kind of also one of the guys, which made it really fun. So senior year was like my first full year of playing a full season, which was awesome. But after that, I was like, yeah, man, I love this sport. I want to be around it. I want to see what my friends are doing. And then at Penn State, I knew I was getting into journalism, knew I was getting into media. And first club I joined, nobody really talked about lacrosse or knew anything. So I was like, hey, like, I know the sport. Like, I can cover it for you guys if you let me. And they took a chance on me. And from there, this is what's happened. So it's been pretty cool. But yeah, it's really just, it's a testament to the friends I had at school, the people I got to see grow up with me and see the places they've gone in the sport that really got me jump started in the game.
I love that. That's that. I mean, I played club college lacrosse, and that's all it was like you're in the dorm with someone that has some kind of an athletic background, and you grab an extra stick and you take them out and you start throwing. And I used to always tell people, like, lacrosse is just this sport that, like, gets in your veins. Like, you just kind of can't. I don't know. You just can't really get rid. And I love hockey. I've played hockey for a while, and I grew up playing basketball. It's funny to me how, in a weird way, so many people. I think we think a lot about basketball and how it translates to lacrosse, because in so many ways it is, basketball on grass, but. I think so many people don't really think about, if you're Canadian, I'm sure you probably do, but so many Americans don't tend to think about, like, how much they're the same thing. I don't know why, but that, I don't know. I love that. That's your story. That's your experience with the game.
I will say, like, for me, I played LSM, so being down low on that side of the field, I think offensive principles of lacrosse are really focused more toward basketball. In my eyes, at least. But defensively, there are a lot of things that I could draw on from hockey to bring into lacrosse. It also helped that, the three poles that we had were all hockey players. And one's playing hockey at Notre Dame right now. Another one's a tight end at Miami for their football program. He was committed to Notre Dame to be a pole there, but switched sports, went to go play football down in Miami. And then the third one, just a hockey player that ended up playing a little junior hockey and now is at school now. But those guys would just be like, hey, think about this hockey situation when we're doing this on the defensive side of the field, and it will help you out. And so for me, I learned lacrosse through hockey principles in a sense, and also helped that I had a hockey coach who was my lacrosse coach as well. So he could break it down that way. But once you learn it from a hockey standpoint, you can learn it from the lacrosse standpoint. That's at least how it worked for me. But yeah, it really is. All sports, in my opinion, really are just, they all build on each other. There are principles you can learn in any sport and take to another sport. And for me, I watch everything from golf to soccer to hockey to lacrosse to basketball. I watch every sport, and you can learn something from that sport and say, hey, this is how it could help out that sport or another sport. Mm-hmm. So I'm a sports sicko, but everything builds on each other.
Yeah, that's funny. The interactions that we've had, like, now that you say that, I'm like, okay, I get that, because I was always that way. I got married, and I've had to pare down what I watch and stuff, but I was always watching everything. I got into Aussie rules football. I don't know if you've ever watched that. I was just flipping through one night at like 3 a.m, and it was on, and I fell in love. Like, it's such a fun game. But let's talk about the Carolina Chaos. First of all, I have to ask, just because I'm curious, not a gotcha or anything. I'm from North Carolina. I'm just wondering what experience, if any, you have with the Carolinas, since I guess technically they represent both North and South.
So I have family that actually live down in North Carolina. It's on my dad's side. His sister lived down there for a bit. They moved back to Pittsburgh. My dad's from Pittsburgh, so is my mom. So everybody's now kind of stationed there. But there was a point in time where some family lived down there. We actually go and vacation down in the Carolinas, whether we go down to South to Hilton Head, or maybe we go somewhere else, whether it's a lake in North or South Carolina. But we tend to get out there. So, I'm familiar with the state. Helps as well having some friends down there that are playing some college ball. So I get to learn some things from them as well. But in terms of actual experience in Carolina, it's really just been, vacation and family time. Outside of that, not too much.
No, that's totally fine. And again, it's not a gotcha. If you have no experience, that's totally fine. I just like the, you're associated with the Carolina team. I just wonder. I born and raised there. That was, I live in New Hampshire now, which is wildly different. But I love North Carolina and not so much South Carolina, but that's a different story for a different day. But we talked about it earlier. You were the writer for them last year, so you have kind of had a busy off season, we'll say. I don't want to go too much into the Andy Tower stuff that's been talked about a bunch. My first question was, in your mind, what do you think the nearly 2 months of not having a coach did to this team in terms of like trying to prep for this season? Because I know it's hard for me I'm not really a Chaos fan, but them being the hometown team, I am kind of, if that makes any sense. And I was a little frustrated because it felt like by the time Spencer Ford and Roy Colsey were announced, it felt like basically all of the free agents were already off the market. Not officially because free agency hadn't opened, but most everybody had already like re-signed or had made some kind of announcement or whatever. And it just felt like they were already like the moment they joined, they were already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. That's like the big thing. I think there may have been a few guys that Spencer would have liked to get a phone call with and get his hands on just to have a chance to, have that conversation, maybe pitch the Chaos and pitch Roy Colty to X player or Y player, whether that person exists or not, whoever it is. So obviously free agency, maybe it could have made some noise. Spencer is a known team builder and a person that can build a championship winning team. So it may have made things a little more interesting. But to that point, I think just kind of those 2 months, probably just a great reflection period for some of the players heading into the season. We've seen across the league players holding out, doing different stuff like that. So I think for them, it just opens up a 2-month reflection period where it's kind of like, where do I stand in the sport right now? Where do I stand with this team? Where do I stand with my future? So it gave guys a chance to reflect, which also, opens up a chance to kind of sit down and understand, hey, like, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. So it builds kind of that momentum toward the season. Once, Spencer and Roy were announced as the new staff, once they were announced, it kind of gives those guys a chance to really fully, come to and realize, hey, we've got an excellent staff now. And after this 2 months of reflection, this feels like the perfect opportunity, even if it didn't feel like that 2 months ago. AT, obviously an excellent coach, an excellent human being, amazing personality. It's hard to replace that. That's something that Coach Colsey's talked to me about actually personally. He's like, I'm not going to be Andy Towers on the sideline. I'm not bringing as many social media clips. I'll try my hardest, but nobody can be Andy Towers. And those two have a relationship, both being from Connecticut, and they've talked and had those conversations. Nothing but respect for AT. He was unbelievable in that first season with me. But I mean, yeah, maybe they miss out on free agents and miss out on stuff. But I think really looking at it, like Josh Byrne holding out really changed the philosophy for Colsey and for Ford. So I think this season really just having the opportunity to get their hands on a team, whether it be a team full of superstars or a team full of new players, it's just a great chance for them to showcase what they're going to bring and kind of make their pitch heading into the 2026 season of why, hey, like, this is why you want to play on the Carolina Chaos. I wouldn't say like there's really no expectations, I would say, for this team this year because of everything that's unfolded in the offseason. But I think it's really just a great chance for everybody to kind of showcase who they are and what they are made of as a team, as a staff, as a group. Because, I mean, obviously there are a lot of really good players on this team. Coach Colsey is not only a Hall of Famer as a player, but he is a very solid coach from the principles that he's, explained to me in our conversations and the people I've talked to that have played for him before. And then Spencer Ford, his resume is about as solid as it gets as a GM. So I think, Chaos fans might be worried about this season, but I think as you look to the future, things are in great hands. And obviously, maybe didn't have the offseason that you wanted to have if you're a Chaos fan or if you're following the Chaos as your team. But I think there's a lot of good things to look forward to in the future on that side as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree that, short of Joe Spallina, who was kind of my number one, before we knew everything that was going on with Nat St. Laurent, I think they were great hires. Like you said, long term, I'm not worried about the Chaos long term. This season looks like it's going to be rough for me. I'm not putting those words in your mouth, but I did wonder. Obviously, we had the draft, and I know the Chaos fans that I have talked to were not stoked about the draft. Obviously, some things came out afterwards that made it make at least fractionally more sense in terms of Will Bowen not being around and some of that. So I'm wondering, just from the conversations that you've had and your understanding of having been around the team, what your kind of feelings were overall about the draft.
I think that the trade from 5 to 8, obviously that was the biggest discussion point going into the draft. Every conversation I had, it was our draft starts after Boston takes their player at 4, and really after we know who Joe Spallina is going with at 3. That's kind of when our draft starts. I think there's kind of, everybody knew that it was Kirst and then McAdory from the Chaos standpoint, at least, and there was like a 99% belief that it was going to be McAsee 4th. So in our conversations, I'd be asking about some of those top names that you would first think about in the top 5. Looking at it March and April, some of those top 5 names on the big boards, on the mock drafts, all that stuff. I was asking about those names, but consistently I knew to ask about Owen Hiltz, partially because I figured maybe that was a guy that would be drafted in the 2nd round and fill a hole that needed to be filled on the lefty wing. But in every conversation I had with Coach Colsey, who Syracuse grad himself and self-proclaimed number 1 Syracuse fan, except for when they're playing Virginia and playing his sons, he loved Owen Hiltz's game. So I kind of got a feeling that there was a chance that Hiltz would end up with the Chaos. And I think it really makes sense, because if you look at kind of the roster breakdown and the people they have on the offensive side of the field, a ton of righties, not many lefties. So they needed a lefty. And in this year's draft, the second best lefty on that board was Owen Hiltz. And there's an argument to be made that he's maybe the number 1 lefty. And to me, knowing Hiltzy since I was 14 years old, his cousin was actually in my class at Culver. So his younger cousin was my age, knew Owen himself as well. My second year, we lived, probably 10, 15 doors down the hall from each other. And he was always in the room 2 doors down across the hall. It was Dave Anderson, who's now playing at Yale. But Hiltzy's IQ is something that you can't teach, and he's the type of player, even if he doesn't have his best year this season, it's kind of built off what I just said a little bit before, a couple minutes ago. It's the future is in great hands if he's a part of that offense. Every offense he's a part of, he doesn't need to be the primary handler, and he's still going to rip apart a defense and do it quietly. Like, he's a silent assassin. It's the only way to really classify his skill set and his tool bag. So with that pick, not a shock. And I think that's a great 1st round pick to close out the 1st round. Maybe taking him at 5 would have caused a larger discussion. And in that trade, you pick up an extra 2nd round pick. I think some of the trades they had to make pre-draft, and where they lose a draft pick, bringing in Degnan in that 4th round, it kind of complicated things. But in the case of Virch and McDonald, Levi Virch is too good to leave on the board. And that's something that Colsey said. Like, he's unbelievable off the ground. He's great through the middle of the field. The big question is, how well can he defend down low? I think he's a 6'2" pole. Like, he's going to be physical. He's going to get into the body of his attackman. The biggest thing with a player like Levi Virch, who's spent time with Team Canada, it's you can't really spend too much time focusing on the college tape just because he's not playing in the strongest conference. You just have to look at the player themselves and the skill set they have. And he's off the charts on everything except on-ball defense. And who knows what it's really going to look like when he's playing a pro, where he could rise to the occasion and be ready for it. Maybe he was spending some energy doing other things that were more fun across the field as a pole, as a former pole myself. Yeah, it was a lot more fun picking up a ground ball and running in transition than it was having to hold a 6'3" attackman from backing you down in the low paint area. And that's just the reality of it. So I think that's, a home run to get in the second round. Then J-Mac, I've watched Maryland now torment the Nittany Lions twice this season, and Jack McDonald has been a large factor. Will Schaller is the big time name there on the defensive end outside of McNaney, and it's because he's their shutdown number one guy that's following in the footsteps of Ajax and Makar and all the guys before that. But J-Mac is constantly shutting down an opposing team's number one midfielder. And he's, like Hiltzy, kind of just a silent assassin. Like, he's not going to be talked about as much as some of his teammates, but he's going to produce, and he's going to do it quietly. But it's going to be a few ground balls, a few cause turnovers, and heck, he may even score in transition as well. So I think it's two great picks. Yeah, obviously, two polls, probably not what Chaos fans were thinking heading into the draft, but I don't think it's something you should be too mad about, because it allows for position battles to happen at training camp here in a week now, and seeing those battles at camp. I'd rather have a kid coming off a college season who's looking to play and is in game shape, ready to give somebody a run for their money, because it's going to make a better training camp atmosphere across the board. It's going to bring more competition. So maybe it's a miss, but as Coach said and as Spencer said, J-Mac was always on the board. He was kind of the guy that were like, third round, we could probably get him and be fine with that, and that fills the hole we have at LSM. Hiltzy was always a guarantee in that first spot once they realized kind of how things were going to shake up. And just Levi was a situation where, hey, we just can't pass on this guy. So maybe not the draft Chaos fans expected, but really you're picking up three players that could very well be great pros. The only downside is two of them are playing in championship weekend and might be missing some time at training camp and potentially that first game, which is the only downside to picking a guy on Cuse and a guy on Maryland, I'd say.
Yeah. For me, the issue that I had wasn't with necessarily any of the individual picks. It was just more that, especially, Spencer Ford and Roy Colsey had spent so much time talking about, the strength of this team is the defense. We have to build around it. And Owen Hiltz is a very good player, and maybe he's still around later, but you don't know that. And if he's the guy you want, you get him when you can get him. So not too mad about him going at 8. What really surprised me, and I think most Chaos fans, at least the ones that I've talked to, was not going after Sam King when he was still available, especially when this team is crying out for offensive help, generally speaking, but also someone who can quarterback the offense from attack, and especially back at X. And I know that the Joshua trade obviously comes into play, or free agent, whatever, acquiring him, however they did it. I don't remember exactly. Do you think that it was more about trusting Joshua and the guy that they already have in their locker room, or more about like, we need to go get the guy that we need to go get?
Yeah, so initially when I was, back in March, when I really started to take a look at draft boards, mock drafts, stuff like that, and just the prospects in general, Sam King was one of the first players that I really asked both Spencer and Roy about, and they had great things to say about him as a player and what his abilities are. But the more you dive into the Chaos roster, Sam King's a guy that's 5'8", 5'9", that's a crafty dodger, right-handed, but just wants to get to his spots from X. I truly don't know how that's going to work in the new Colsey offense that's a little more unstructured and working as inside hands with limited dodging from X to maybe initiate. I'm not really sure fully how the offense is going to jumpstart and how things are going to work in the flow of it all. But in the Chaos offense, where Sam King would be expected to be on the right side of the field with his strong hand in the middle, you already have Ross Scott. As you said, you have Josh Zawada, who's a righty. Zawada's case, he's a little more two-handed, so he may fill some holes on the other side. But then you have Jules, you have, Shane Knobloch, you have other guys on that righty side that it just would have been hard for another undersized player to get in and cause a ton of damage if they don't already have it. And I think in skipping on King in the draft, it was kind of because we saw what happened today. You bring in Jackson Eicher, Ryan Bell. Those are the two big ones to me. Ryan Bell is a righty 5'8" attackman that had back-to-back 66-point seasons where he had 40 assists in both campaigns, I believe. And that's just like, you're getting a right-handed feeder that can feed from that side. All right, you don't have to waste a draft pick on him. Sounds pretty smooth. Not a lot of people watching Providence college lacrosse probably, but I'll tell you right now, Ryan Bell helped carry that offense when things were looking dark at the beginning of the season, kind of made them the team they were toward the end of the season, almost clinching that berth over Georgetown, but shaky there. But then you look at Eicher, downhill dodger who's going to play physical, can fill kind of that dodging ability that King would have had. Maybe it's coming from a different spot, but it just draws back to Spencer Ford has a process, and I'm never going to question it, A, because I've seen the results in the past, and B, I don't know if there really is anybody better at building a team right now with past history outside of like Stags. Like Stags has been to the championship a ton and has built some great teams with intriguing players, whether it be an undrafted Division III player, a Levi Anderson, or maybe stealing a guy like TJ Malone in the third round. Like, he's building teams, he's doing it year after year. But Spencer Ford, to that point, like, he could very well do the same thing. And I'm not going to question it until I kind of have more examples on the page. But at first, it didn't make sense skipping on King. But looking at it now, like, they've brought in some other guys, and they really saw two players they loved, got them where they wanted them, and Verge just kind of happened because he was there. And they know, like, I think Spencer has that thought in his head where it's like, if I need someone, I'll do whatever it takes to get them, and that's what's going to happen. And there's enough talent this year in the college lacrosse world where they were going to steal somebody after the draft and bring them in for training camp and give that person a chance to battle it out. So,
no, they definitely. Talking to you, it's like, okay, no, I can see it. I think part of the problem is that the disconnect between maybe what like the staff sees and what fans see is that I think they have a very clear idea of how they want to play offense and stuff. And I don't know that they've really explained it, which is fine. It's game planning stuff. Like, they don't need to come out and be like, this is how we're running plays. But because fans haven't seen it, and we're coming off of, Josh Byrne and Dane Smith 2 years ago. And, this very like structured big name offense to kind of a bunch of guys that don't carry that level of weight around. I think it's hard to see. I'll get you out of here on this because I know you got to get out of here. What are realistic expectations for this squad? Obviously, everybody goes into the season wanting to win a championship. We have already discussed this may be a bit of a down year for the Chaos, and as they look to build maybe 2, 3, 4 years out. So what do you think are realistic expectations for the Carolina Chaos this year?
I truly think like they could get back to the playoffs because the defense last year, that's an offense that was the worst in the league, but it was the best defense, and that's why they were in the playoffs. I think it could very well happen again, and it's partially because you've got some guys stepping into their second, third year in the league, and they've got some more experience now, and things are slowing down a bit for them as players. But it's also just building, like, it's hard to really bet against a Blaze Reardon. You got Jack Rowlett and Jared Newman down low. Troy Ray still dominating the middle of the field like he has for so many years now. Like, you know what you're getting on one side of the field. And if you have an offense that can score more than 10 goals a game, like it did the year prior, then if your defense plays the same and you're scoring more than 10 goals, the math on the paper says, hey, you can make the playoffs again. It's going to be a war. I think every team got better in the draft and just through free agency, whoever, retired or who signed, whether, those situations happen across the board and everybody has new faces and whatnot. But like the chaos, everybody's going to say, yeah, this is the last place team in the league or maybe bottom two. They realistically could make the playoffs. So you look at it last year, the known big-time player on the team was Josh Byrne, and Josh Byrne did Josh Byrne things on the offensive side of the field. But then the rest of the group, it was just kind of trial by committee, and that's what it's going to be. But it's going to be 6 players at a time, trial by committee, and they're going to find the groups that work. And then once they find that, it's going to have some output on the field. So with the knowledge that you have the league's best defense from a season ago and are losing one piece that missed games last year. Like Will Bowen missed a few games throughout the course of the season because of things that were going on, and players stepped up and filled his role and played very well. Like it's very hard to bet against a chaos missing the playoffs. Right away, you want to freak out and say, oh, these guys aren't making it. There's not a chance, that no chance in the world that this team makes the playoffs. But it's really, really hard to say there's not a chance when you look at what's on the back end and just what the stat breakdown of last year was with the best offense or the best defense and the worst offense. Like if you're able to make the playoffs and go to the semis and crash and burn, losing 10-1 in the semis, like so be it. You could still make the playoffs again. Is that maybe the best case scenario for the team? Probably not. I think everybody wants to win and nobody's going to lose games on purpose. The chaos would benefit from a better draft pick, but it's a team that could win. And the championship ready defense is something I think this team is going to preach a lot at training camp, and something that Coach Colsey will mention a lot to his players. It's going to be like, hey guys, we know on one side of the field we are solid and we are sure, but on the other side of the field, we want some of you to step up and show who you really are and what you are really made of. And it's a team that it's kind of like Penn State in a sense where they're the dark horse of the PLL this season, kind of like last year where offense is in questions, but that defense is a lock and it's going to steal games, and you don't want to be on the wrong end of a great defensive performance. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of them being the dark horse, because I think they're pretty much playing with house money. Like if they are the last place team in the league, no one's going to be surprised by that. And if that is how you're going into the season, anything you do that's good, like, is going to be, good. Like you have nothing to lose. Like just go out and play. And we have talked for years about the razor thin margins in this league and how teams can go from last to first almost overnight. And, the Water Dogs were the worst team in the league last year, and they lost 6 1-goal games. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean, the last place team isn't necessarily the worst team in the league, and vice versa. So no, that's interesting. And yeah, they make the playoffs. Anything can happen, especially with Blaze in goal. So anyway,
I will say too, you look at some of the previous seasons as well. The Chaos are a team that's historically below 500 and making the playoffs and going on runs. So it's kind of once they get there, they step up and start playing true chaos ball, but it's not going to be the prettiest. This is a throwback to former Penn State basketball coach Micah Shrewsbury. He used to say about his team, gritty, not pretty. That's how we're going to play basketball. And that's kind of how the Carolina Chaos are going to play lacrosse. It's going to be gritty. It's not going to be pretty, but they're going to get results. And oftentimes those results lead to playoff lacrosse. So it's really just comes down to how things shake up this year and what those bounces are and who gets those 1-goal swings in their favor.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, with Blaze and gold, like I feel like you're never really out of a game. Anyway, again, I know you got to head out. So thank you very much for joining us today. I've really appreciated it. And I'm sure we will try to get you back on at some point over the summer. One last question. Are you going to the championships this weekend?
I won't be there this weekend. Here in Indiana, it's a bit far back out to Mass. I know
Yeah.
Paul LaMonica, who is the Atlas rider. He's on Cuse as well. He's a backup faceoff guy there. He's trying to get me to come out, but I told him, hey, probably staying home here in Indy. I should, though, be up in Chicago later this summer when the PLL travels up there for throwback weekend, since that's, 3-hour drive. So should be up there.
Nice. All right. Well, I would love to get out there because Chicago is one of like my favorite summer cities, but maybe one day we'll meet up somewhere. But if not, like I said, I'll try to get you back out on the show some point during the summer. We'll see when. But thanks again for joining me.
Of course.
And that is all we have time for today. A huge thank you to Hayden for joining me today. I really hope for his sake and Coach Tambroni's sake that this time next week Penn State are the national champions. That would be a lot of fun. I think it would do a lot of very good things for our sport. And like I said at the end of the interview, we will definitely get Hayden back on at some point this summer to talk more about the Carolina Chaos and what is happening during the PLL this season. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you are subscribed, leave a review, tell your friends to check it out. If they are at all interested in lacrosse, it really does help the show. And I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. That being said, I will be back with more lacrosse, more conversations, and probably more than a few opinions that no one asked for. So until then, I'll catch you guys on the internet.